Suppose you have to recycle something bigger than this. Every day, thousands of vehicles go from this to this.
I love what I do. I get to tear stuff up. I mean, what guy wouldn't like to do that?
But they have to be destroyed as carefully as they were built.
We don't throw metals away lightly.
With us today. The captain has turned off the seatbelt sign, so you're free to move about now. Please check the overhead bins carefully to be sure you remove all your belongings, as this aircraft is about to die.
A jet like this 747 may have a lifespan of 100,000 hours in flight, or in human terms, about 52 years of work. Naturally, it's ready to retire. Each year, about 450 such aircraft make their final landing. Dozens come here to die. Roswell International Air Center in the American Southwest.
I remember bringing my grandchildren down here for the first time, and later on asked would they like to go to Disney World for spring vacation. Unanimously, they said no, they'd like to go back to Papa's place to see the airplanes being crushed. Love what I do. I get to tear stuff up. I mean, what guy wouldn't like to do that? We're taking a plane and crushing it and making beer cans out of it in a matter of hours.
What began as $250 million worth of beer cans could end up as $7 million worth of parts and scrap. Today, they're scrapping a monster, the world's biggest commercial cargo aircraft, a 747 freighter. It's so big, the area inside one wing could hold 45 medium-sized automobiles. And the entire plane is almost twice the length of the Wright brothers' first flight. Most of its weight is aluminium. 68 tons of it, enough to help manufacture about 450 average-size automobiles. Every day, we use metal that's been recycled, and it doesn't all come from soda cans. So how does a behemoth like this get cut down to size? It takes about 60 days to process an entire airliner, from the day it arrives to the day it's scrapped. And every step is mapped out like a battle plan. First stage, what's called the teardown process. Gutting the aircraft to nothing but a shell.
This is a Boeing 747. It's a cargo airplane.
A crew of 4 to 6 men can tear down a single airplane in 3 or 4 weeks, depending on its size.
Basically what we're doing is we're getting everything that's not metal out of the airplane.
The metal skin will end up being melted down, but it has to be as free as possible of other material.
We pulled down all the interior panels. We'll pull all the insulation out once all that's done. We'll load it in a trash truck and haul it to the dump. It's of no value to us.
About 20% of an airplane gets trashed, mostly insulation and plastics. The rest gets recycled. Even before teardown begins, a cargo plane is a big empty shell. But you'd be surprised what Roman's crew can salvage. Cargo loading systems, hydraulic systems, cockpit instruments.
Basically anything that has a part number and serial number.
And a 747 has 6 million parts. To reach some parts means working in a space the size of a coat closet. In the age of terrorism, most sections of an aircraft are now off limits. But Roman offers a private tour. Most cabin windows are made of plexiglass, so they generally get scrapped. But the cockpit is all glass, and it's valuable. A window like this costs $50,000 to manufacture.
This one particular window here, it's actually pretty hard to remove, and it probably weighs in the neighborhood of 200 to 300 pounds. Kind of makes it a challenge to remove it, being up this high and get it down safely is sometimes quite a task.
The entire window will be removed intact, shipped off for refurbishing, then installed in another cockpit. In the cockpit itself, almost everything gets reused, from chairs to instruments.
The flight engineer sits here. He's in charge of a lot of the fuel. These are your fueling gauges, and it tells you what fuel's in what tank.
Depending on the model, a 747 has from several hundred to nearly 1,000 lights, gauges and switches. Next time you're watching an action movie where the hero scrambles through the guts of an aircraft, compare it to this, the tight squeeze that Roman's crews work in.
This would be the lower forward cargo compartment, basically beneath the main cargo floor. In the very belly of the airplane is the pressurization and the heating and the cooling aspect of it, and this is a lot of the ducts from there, and it's just stuff that's not metal that will end up going to the trash, basically. Up here by our shop, we will pull everything that we can up to the landing gear. The landing gear is about the last thing to go.
Now, the plane is finally ready for shredding. The crew calls this process sizing, cutting down the aircraft for recycling. Of the two shredders, the bigger takes huge bites. The smaller one takes the big chunks and nibbles them into morsels. Each shredder weighs a fraction of its entire meal. But both have a strong bite. That wing seems featherweight, but it actually weighs 43 tons, as much as 23 average automobiles. No more fuel in the wings, but they still contain fuel vapor. So they open all the vents and caps to let it evaporate. Otherwise, they may have to put out a fire. What seems fragile is so tough, it withstands tens of thousands of takeoffs and landings. A 747 is made of a high-strength honeycomb called Nomex, the same family of material used in bulletproof vests. Aluminium is so strong, you could prop up a small car on 4 six-packs. High strength plus lightweight makes aluminium the world's second most used metal. Replacing all this aluminium with steel would double the weight of the metal and make liftoff impossible. Britain recycles nearly 500,000 tons of aluminium each year, enough to build more than 6,000 747s. Here, they salvage every morsel they can.
All the wiring will be removed before the airplane gets scrapped.
A 747 contains 274 kilometers of wiring, all of it copper. And pound for pound, it's worth even more than aluminium.
I know at one time we were probably getting probably close to about $2 a pound for the wiring.
That could be more than 7,000 euros worth of wiring by the time his crew finishes.
I've been an aircraft mechanic for pretty close to 20 years. In the teardown business, about 6 years. It's a neat feeling fixing them and watching them fly away, but I also like seeing it get crunched, I guess.
It's big work, and it's sweaty. The mercury can soar to 45 degrees.
In the summer, I've heard you could fry an egg off the concrete, so it gets hot. I've had the opportunity every now and then for a smaller airplane inside the hangar, but for the most part, it's all outside.
Inside is a different kind of hotspot. A sizzling legend. This may be the most famous hangar in the world.
If you'll go into Google and you just type in the words Hangar 84, this hangar will come up. The story is this is where they took the aliens from the crash of the spaceship that's supposed to have happened here July 4th, 1947.
The Air Force said a research balloon crashed. Conspiracy theorists said it was a UFO.
Every July 4th, the population of this town almost doubles. There are all kinds of Winnebagos parked outside our hangar. People come in to see if the mothership, I guess, is going to return. It's comical. These people, they just come in from all over the country to take a look at this hangar.
Here's what's really stored inside Hangar 84. All the parts they've stripped.
All of this stuff right here is from the Airbus type of airplane that we have been tearing down.
They call these parts rotables, items that can be reused in another airplane.
The next one over is from a Boeing 727.
A small airplane may have 300 rotable parts. A 747, more than 2,000. Which makes Hangar 84 a gold mine. On a given day, it holds about $1 million worth of inventory. The company repairs parts and sells them on the internet.
When we remove the parts off the airplane, we will put a tag on it stating what airplane it's from, who removed it, the date. I imagine you could probably pull up the life history through the part number and the serial number.
Among the thousands of rotables that Roberto checks is the most famous part of any aircraft.
Well, that's a black box.
Some record cockpit chatter and others record flight data. A refurbished unit is worth about $10,000.
This guy records all the information that's happening in the airplane for the engines, the position of the aircraft. Basically, all the information gets stored over here in this guy, right here.
To solve the mystery of a crash, investigators try to retrieve the black box, even when the box isn't actually black. Three hours after they started chewing, the shredders finish their meal.
We'll do between 40 and 60 airplanes a year, depending on the size. Last year, we processed about 85 airplanes. I think the last 2 years in a row, we were one of the largest aircraft metal processors in the world.
For a lightweight metal, aluminium can fetch a hefty price, up to 70 cents a pound. More than $100,000 for an entire 747. The metal fragments will be compacted, then trucked off for recycling. Most of it ends up in China.
And they take it and make products out of it that they then sell back to us.
The recycled metal could wind up on another airplane or on a car. You could even be driving around with metal you once flew in. 2 vehicles in one.
It never ceases to amaze me that when we bring a group in that are looking at buying airplanes from one of our customers, we get to take them out to the back, and it's amazing how they bail out of the car with cameras when we're crushing an airplane, and they'll stand there for 20, 30, 40 minutes, all of them acting like big kids punching each other in the arm. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? Look at that.
With the plane cut down to size, how does all this scrap turn into new metal? It's a roundabout answer. It ends more than 2,000 kilometers away in Florida. And it starts with another shredder, another vehicle, and another clash of heavy metal. And the woman who makes it possible. Lisa roams all over Florida looking for scrap.
We do automobiles, cars, trucks, semi-trucks, refrigerator trailers, rail, trains, anything steel, metal.
Once, she even found a military bomber.
Our goal is to purchase about 1,000 tons a day.
The equivalent of about 500 cars. Today, she'll meet her quota, and then some, thanks to an unlikely customer. U.S. Sugar is America's largest producer of sugarcane. They harvest more than 600,000 tons a year, about 10 kilos for every man, woman and child in the UK. That's a lot of sugar to haul, so they have their own railroad. It's the world's largest private agricultural rail line. They own nearly 200 kilometers of track, 14 locomotives, and more than 900 cars, all to move their sugarcane from field to mill. But they're not just in the sugar business. They also do a lot of recycling. The sugar company gets up to 40 years of life from a boxcar. But these cars are diehards. This one's been in service since 1929. This one since 1941. Both starting work back when railroads moved not just America's freight, but most Americans. Now, they're at the end of the line. But before Lisa can haul this mega scrap away for shredding, it has to be cut down to size. Ashley George has been working in the scrap business his whole life. Each year, he cuts down about 150 boxcars for local railroads. And today, he and David demonstrate the best way to do it. First, cut the thin bars that attach the boxcar to the wheel assemblies, known as the trucks.
The bars that we have to cut is under there. See the ones that's going back towards the trucks? And when we cut them, this whole top piece is loose from them trucks.
Next, remove the boxcar from the trucks. The boxcar weighs 50% more than this loader, but no problem. Now, Ashley needs a machine that can reduce 18 tons of metal to scrap. The CAT 322 is so big, you need a special permit to haul it on public roads. It weighs about 36 tons, twice the weight of the boxcar, with extra wide tracks to stabilize it while it works. Now, it's metal versus metal. And it's no contest. This cutting head can slice through steel nearly 2 inches thick, like scissors through paper. As this rail car dies, it deserves a eulogy. The US runs one freight car for every 230 citizens. In the UK, freight rail moves almost a ton of goods each year for every man, woman and child. Around the world, entire countries would shut down without cars like this. With the shredder, Ashley can cut about 25 tons of metal an hour. Both cars in a single morning. Ashley will take all this scrap to his junkyard and cut it into smaller pieces before hauling it to Lisa's company for further shredding. And remember, today Lisa will exceed her quota, because railroads recycle more than rail cars.
When we're upgrading track, we can recycle the older track for metal.
Lisa just bought about 80 kilometers of worn-out track. And guess who lands the contract to cut it up? Ashley & Sons. Before the rails get fed into Lisa's shredder, they too need cutting into digestible chunks. This torch cuts at 3,500 degrees, more than 10 times hotter than your kitchen broiler. If you're wondering why Ashley's not using his shredder with the T-Rex jaws, here's why. The cutting head holds some of the most expensive knives you'll ever see. Nearly 3,000 euros per set.
These knives will last probably about 3 months. And that's cutting 100 ton a day. And then you can flip them over 4 times. Each time you can flip them, so they will last about a year.
The knives on the cutter head are still new and sharp.
The rail cars and all, we cut through and it don't dull the knives, but when the knives get kind of dull, that's when we'll cut through the track and all, because we don't care about the knives then.
For now, Ashley can still use his T-Rex to cut plenty else. Tires won't dull the blades. More metal destined for Lisa's shredder. Oil well pipes, Nearly 2 centimeters thick, yet snapped like toothpicks. Still more metal. Like rail cars, trucks keep the world moving. And yes, it's also destined for Lisa's Mega Shredder. All in all, a good haul for the scrap buyer. But for the scrap, the shredding has just begun. At Lisa's Mega Shredder, the first load of Ashley's scrap arrives. Each of the hammers that do the shredding weighs about 200 kilos. 14 hammers in all. With such a mega capacity for shredding, it has a mega appetite for metal.
Cars, refrigerators, washing machines, all kinds of stuff.
A Mega Shredder never loses its appetite, but it prefers Goldilocks portions. Not too much, or the shredder overloads. Not too little, or it loses efficiency.
If I get blank spots in my mill where there's nothing in it, then all of a sudden it sees the car, all of a sudden my mill motor amps go through the roof, and well, my electric bill gets pretty high after that too.
The shredder's motor also has a Goldilocks disposition. Joe has figured out its ideal capacity, somewhere between 50 and 65% of its full power.
We don't want to cook it up to 100%. We know we're working the motor hard, and we know we're getting good efficiency out of the motor.
And by precisely managing the flow of scrap, Joe can actually put it to work to do some of the shredding.
We like to keep the box full. Therefore, the shred that's in the box, not only the hammers are cutting, but the shred itself in the mill is also cutting the shred too. It's a lot more efficient.
The shredder's target quota, 136 tons of scrap per hour. That's equal to 1 car every 50 seconds. Every minute it's not shredding is a minute it's not making money. So Lisa constantly searches for scrap to keep it fed. One of her customers supplies a different kind of heavy metal. In 1 year, America scraps some 14 million vehicles, equal to nearly 1/10 of the nation's passenger fleet, and almost all of them get recycled. Billy Glick processes about 50 cars a day, about 1 car every 12 minutes. But he begins with a kind of slow-motion recycling, called pick and pay. For 1 month, customers can pick over a car and pay for any parts they want. And buying used parts is at least 50% cheaper than buying new ones. What's left gets dissected by Billy's crews, like this heap they're working on today. First, they remove aluminium parts like the radiator and condenser, and some of the wiring, just like the crews that tear down planes. Next, what looks like a tooth extraction without anesthesia. It extracts the engine and transmission, made of iron and aluminium. Some extractions go easier than others. Now the last phase, compacting. It all happens one car at a time, but it yields big dividends. The US scrap industry gets 1/3 of its iron and steel from auto recyclers like Billy. They're flattened and stacked like pancakes for ease of transport to the mega shredder. But all that aluminium meets a different fate. The same fate as the aluminium back in Roswell. This is a sweat furnace. It burns at 870 degrees Celsius to melt down aluminium, about 3 times the temperature of a household oven. And Billy is cooking up another batch of scrap. For a lightweight metal, aluminium is awfully tough. A soda can, unearthed a century from now, may have barely changed. It could take nature 200 years to break down aluminium. Burning aluminium removes impurities in the scrap.
In the next 10 minutes, it should be melted. And when it's melted, that holding chamber will be full with approximately 6,000 pounds of material.
That's 2,700 kilos. To empty the molten aluminium, Billy has his own miniature railroad.
There's 4 different molds that are all identical, and you'll pull them along in a little train. So you pop a hole in the plug, and the aluminum starts flowing out.
Aluminium is the terminator of metals. No matter how many times you recycle it, you can't destroy it. Nearly 2/3 of the aluminium in a new car is recycled.
When each one gets full, you just move to the next one, and move to the next one, and then the last one.
Each car holds 1/4 of the furnace's contents. After hardening overnight, the aluminium can be removed. Billy stores at least 18 tons of aluminium, about 27 ingots, before shipping them to a buyer. From tool makers to engine manufacturers. Buyers prefer ingots over raw scrap because it's a clean product that's ready to work with. You can't say the same of cars. They come in dirty. They contain more than metal. And sometimes they explode.
3, 2, 1.
So before recycling, even before shredding, cars have to go through the automobile version of detox. Just as with spelling and speech, Brits do things differently from Americans. These guys have detox down to a science. This shop near Birmingham, England, is one of more than 1,500 across the UK, called end-of-life vehicle stations. Good name, because it's where your car comes for cremation. Nigel designed their detoxing rig.
This is probably the most up-to-date rig that's out there on the marketplace. It speeds up the production time.
Rob Taylor trains all of the end-of-life technicians on Nigel's equipment.
When you're making a car, you've got all the tools to do the job for that one particular car. We've got to get all the tools to fit every type of car and every eventuality. So it is a very difficult job to do when you've got to handle all the different makes and models of vehicles.
With a two-man crew, this shop can handle up to 40 vehicles a day, or one car every 12 minutes. And right now, he'll be put to the test. In this business, seconds count, because Rob feeds his cars to an insatiable customer.
Where the shredder eats cars at the rate of upwards 200-300 an hour.
So this spot is the bottleneck between cars coming in and going out.
So it's a question of doing this as quickly as you can.
For safety's sake, the first step in depollution is obvious. Remove the source of electricity.
This is done with some cable cutters. You can then remove the battery.
Cutting the electrical circuit keeps the airbags from deploying. By accident.
Airbags are very, very dodgy items. You've got to treat them with a lot of respect. There are instances of people being very seriously injured with them going off.
By law, the shop must neutralize all the airbags because they contain an explosive charge.
Also, the explosive contained in some of the airbags is very toxic. So we don't want that going through the shredder. The only way we can neutralize an airbag is to deploy it. Because you use all the explosive up in the act of deploying the airbag. Most airbags are electronically fired, so you need a voltage to set them off.
Then they hook up the airbag's deployment control to the best named piece of equipment in the shop. The Auto Bang.
All hazardous substances must be removed from cars, which even means getting the oil out of the shock absorbers.
Using this tool, the shock absorber strut acts as a tank. The very act of punching a hole in the strut seals it, creating a vacuum where nothing moves. Nigel modified the tool to pump air into the strut so the fluid can flow out.
And there you go. The vehicle is now ready to go onto the high rig.
On the high rig, the crew drains oil from the engine, removes coolant from the radiator, and of course drains the gasoline.
There you go, dry as a bone.
Now they can haul the car to a shredder, but not like this. Turning a sedan into a compact means it'll take up less room on the truck. In a single year, the world recycles more than 25 million cars, enough to circle the globe nearly 4 times over. In a typical car, aluminium accounts for less than 1/10 of its weight, but about half of its worth as scrap. And almost all the aluminium gets recycled. The metal in a car is so valuable, nearly every vehicle on the road will end up getting shredded, making the car the world's most recycled product. The cars from the depollution site end up at a shredder like this one in Wales. Around the world, the company recycles nearly 12 million tons of metal a year, enough to build more than 11 million cars. The whole car goes in: metal, plastic, glass and foam. Thanks to technological advances, this plant can separate all the materials after shredding, sparing them the time-consuming process of separating it beforehand. But, like that aluminium in Florida, some of the scrap entering the shredder is already pure metal. Like this. At this site on the outskirts of Coventry, the company collects clean scrap from an auto assembly plant. And it comes from right next door.
We don't throw metals away lightly.
They've been recycling scrap here since day one, more than 60 years ago. A Land Rover contains about 2 tons of steel, and every vehicle contains recycled steel, because using old steel takes less energy than mining ore from the ground. They cast much of the steel as large single panels. Every day, they churn out more than 4,000 panels like these.
This is the outer skin of a door. It starts as a piece of flat steel, but it's been cut, twisted and bent into this position, into this shape. We cut and punch those holes out, and it's the scrap metal that's produced from that process which falls down below the press, is captured and is taken away for the recycling operation.
It's like making donuts, really.
You've made your dough, you've rolled it out into a nice sheet. That's our blank. You take your cutter, it presses in, out pops your donut.
And the scrap?
Gets melted, comes back as another nice sheet of steel, another nice flattened piece of pastry, another cut.
Scrap falls into 2 categories, old and new. This is new scrap, leftovers from manufacturing. So clean, it can go straight to a smelter with minimum prep work.
So we like to recycle that. We don't like to recycle things we've had to buy.
And the scrap makes ideal recyclables. It's clean and pure, what they call segregated at the source.
It's not contaminated with any other metals or products or anything else. It comes out as a nice, clean waste product, because waste is a product to us. We can recycle it straight back in to the market, through into the mill itself. But it's like all recycling. The better segregation you can get at the point of production, the easier it is to recycle it. And the easier it is to recycle it, the more people will do it.
The press shop runs 24 hours a day, so they never stop turning out scrap. Like the depollution site, they compact their scrap before hauling it away.
We get somewhere in the region of about a 3.7 to 1 ratio of weight in each lorry, which means that for every lorry I put out, I would have to put 3.7 off here. That's an awful lot of miles and an awful lot of carbon footprint.
In a single year, they haul about 800 loads of scrap to a shredder. And they recycle more than steel.
I've been here 33 years now. To be honest, we were a throwaway society for the first 25, except for metals. Today now, the vast majority of all the wastes, not just metal waste, they'll go for treatment if they have to, and then for disposal, or they will go into the recycling. So that includes the cardboards, the papers, the aluminium cans.
You can imagine us as modern-day miners. Whereas you have mining companies all around the world, they are there stripping the land and getting materials out of the land. We actually go out and we get materials from the surface of the land, things which people have left behind. We take those materials, we recover them, and at the end of the day, there's money in it. And so eventually, it'll be the recycled material which is actually powering the progression of the world, as opposed to the virgin material out the ground.
You may be looking at the mines of tomorrow, where the ore never runs out. Every vehicle will someday die, but its soul will keep coming back in another body.